everybody, welcome back to TechOdyssey. So today I'm here to talk about something really exciting, and it is the Mediatek Dimensity 9000 system on a chip. I had a friend of mine who went to the summit that they had and picked me up one of these. They were actually handing these out to attendees as part of like a gift basket thing, but I was able to get them to sneak me one out. They had extras. I want to talk about this because I'm genuinely excited about it. One of the great things about being a true tech enthusiast and not an Apple fanboy, a Samsung knight, a Pixel prophet, I don't know, whatever Pixel guys are, Google sheep, who knows. Now, I don't want to offend anybody. There's just names out there for all these different categories of people who care about the particular brand of tech. I like all of it. I like the Samsungs, I like the iPhones, I like the Qualcomm Snapdragons, I like the Mediateks, I like the Exynos. Not really. If we're going to be honest, I don't really like the Exynos. But this right here is big because Mediatek basically was probably the biggest underdog and winner of 2021. These guys came out of nowhere with their Dimensity chipset. And I got to tell you this, nobody has taken Mediatek seriously in the phone processor world for years. They just haven't. They've always been there. They've always been like the little stepbrother. If you remember, I'm a hardcore PC guy. I started off building computers back in like 1995 when I was like 11. And my first ever computer build was a Cyrix DX2 33 megahertz processor motherboard computer. That thing, back then, there was Intel, there was AMD, and then there was Cyrix. And the Cyrix was like the number 3. Well, now what's great is in the system on a chip world, in the processor world in phones, we now have the Tensor chip with Google. We have the Exynos chip with Samsung. We have the A-series chipset, or the M-series chipset with Apple. We have the Qualcomm Snapdragon, and now we have the Mediatek Dimensities. This is the best time ever, and I got to tell you, Mediatek really saved some people's bacon, especially like Xiaomi, because if you look at the last half of 2021, pretty much all their phones have been Dimensity chips. You look at the Redmi phones, you look at the POCO phones, you look at the Xiaomi phones, a whole lot of them, they're rocking these Dimensity 1200 and 800 chipsets. And they're really good. And that's amazing because prior we had the Mediatek Helio, P60, P70, P90, the GT, all that stuff. They're very formidable, but typically we associate Mediatek processors with like $100, $200 phones where they're okay, but usually the benchmarks would be overinflated. They would ramp up the processor power on the core. They would always be a larger processor. Like you would get a Snapdragon like 730, and then they would compare that with what the Mediatek like the P60 would be, and they're like, oh, well, this is on the same par. It's got a higher clock GPU. It's got a higher clock CPU. But then you see, okay, the Mediatek is like a 13 nanometer processor, and then the Snapdragon would be like a 10 or a 9 or an 8. So the tables have turned. This one right here, the 9000, is the very first, world's first ever consumer system on a chip 4 nanometer processor. And this sucker is really, really tiny. And I'm never going to put this in anything. This is actually a really cool holder. It's magnetic. So I can pop this right off. I'm going to take this off. I'm trying not to damage anything. Let's see if I can take it out. There we go. The little chip fell out. I have never in my life held a phone processor before, but look at this. This is the coolest thing ever, and I am super glad that I have it. I might have to do some B-roll and get a close-up. So this right here, world's first 4 nanometer processor. It has some serious power. This thing is way more powerful, like 35% more powerful and more energy efficient than a Snapdragon 888. That's great. When you pair it up against the brand new Snapdragon 8 Generation 1, they're about on par in most areas, and that right there is a true testament to what Mediatek has done. But the biggest thing they've done has not been the hardware acceleration. It has been building, rehabilitating, and taking their reputation to the next level, because you don't ever see these chips in flagship phones, and that's where they need to be. Not the mid-tiers, not just the basics, not the low-end budget models. They need to get these suckers in flagship phones. So I don't know who's going to take the chance. I think that POCO or Xiaomi are probably good options to do this. And really, these Dimensity chipsets this last year, were it not for them, were it not for the diversity of the playing field with these Dimensity chipsets, there probably would have been significant delays on like the Note 11 or the Note 11 Pro, whatever. There's so many of them. The Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite, the Redmi Note There are so many different ones that use these Dimensity chipsets. The POCO X3, I think it's X3, whatever. So I've covered so many of these, I just can't remember all of them right now. But those phones would traditionally have Snapdragon processors in them, and the Snapdragon processors have been in such demand, Qualcomm couldn't keep up. So many people wanted them in their phones, and so many phones have been held up and delayed. So Redmi and Xiaomi and POCO, all made by the same company, made a shift, and they started putting these in there. And that was the biggest thing that they could have ever done, because there was not really a substantial loss in power, not really any substantial or really tangible loss in performance. It allowed them to keep the phones affordable, and it gave Mediatek an opportunity to put their chipsets on center stage for people to see what they could do. And that puts a lot of manufacturers on notice. The biggest one being Qualcomm. Qualcomm is in a really bad spot right now because they lost Google. Google has their own chips now. Internationally, away from the United States, Samsung already has their Exynos processors. You look at Apple, they use their own chips. So really all they have left is like Samsung and Sony and a couple other ones. And I think that that's going to continue to erode even further. A lot of these brands are realizing we need to make our own chips. We need to have our own silicon. We need to not be beholden to these other companies like Qualcomm, who just couldn't keep up with the demand because everybody wanted it. Well, that's great when you have a single point of manufacturing process and everybody's getting the same high quality chips. But when they can't provide them, that means that a lot of brands suffer. And also, when you have your own silicon, you can build that platform. That's what Google is doing. They realize, okay, Apple's having tremendous success controlling their software and controlling their hardware. Now that's what Google's doing. Google's taking the Pixels to the next level. Well, with the Mediatek processor and looking with what we get with the Dimensity chipset, I could see that being a mainstay. Maybe POCO does that all the time now. Maybe we get it in a Motorola. Once we finally break into these, they even had it in the OnePlus phones. So like the Nord 2. It's been a great example of Mediatek finally stepping up their game, getting back on the world stage as a prominent and reliable chipset that people see as desirable, and now they're leading from the front. Now, of course, this came out a little while ago, a couple weeks. We do have the Snapdragon 8 Generation 1, which is their new 4nm, but these guys beat them to the punch by about a week or two, and that was to send a message. That was like a clear shot across the bow. We're coming for you. We're not second string fiddle anymore. You had your opportunity in the sun. You kind of squandered a little bit. You're losing market share. You're losing traction. And here we are trying to make a name for ourselves because we've been sitting here in the shadows for so long. So I like what they're doing. I like where they're headed. I like the aggressive game that they're working right now. And it was the perfect opportunity. 2020, 2021 created the perfect catalyst for Mediatek to ramp up their game, start getting themselves into more platforms, into more phones. And they're also in a lot of different medical hardware and technology. They're actually in a lot of stuff that isn't phones. So Mediatek is doing some great things right now. And they're finally in a position where with this new Dimensity name, they kind of got away from the Helio, the Ps, and all the Gs and all that stuff. Not that the G90, G95, all that stuff weren't good processors. This one right here, though, this could be a new household name. It's great for competition. It's going to help push and keep these guys on their toes and move their hardware to the next level. And Qualcomm can't sit on their laurels anymore with the Snapdragon processors. So competition is at an all-time high. Like if you go back to the computer days in the 90s when it was like we had Winchip, we had Cyrix, we had Intel, we had AMD, we had all these different processor brands. We had these different manufacturers making stuff. That's kind of where we're at in the phone world now. And I'm super excited about it because I don't think it's going to get whittled back down like it was before. I think that we're going to continue to see this. I think that this is a trend that's going to take off. I think in 2021 you're going to see more diversification of silicon and phones than we've ever seen before on the mid-tier and the flagship level. And we're the winners. The consumer is the winner because it helps drive competition. It helps keep your options open. You have less reliance on one single point of failure in the supply chain. And these guys are doing some great stuff. So I just really wanted to show this off. I wanted you to be able to see this actual system on a chip. This is what's in your phone. These are tiny, tiny, tiny little processors. It's got the modem built in. It's got the GPU built in. It's got the processor. All that stuff right here in this tiny little chip is what gives you all that power in your phone. It's really cool. So this is kind of a different video. Maybe it won't get a lot of views. Who knows? I don't really care. I wanted to talk to you guys because those of you who like and watch my videos, I think this is an inspiring video. I think it's something to get excited about. I think it's something to keep an eye on in 2022 as we move forward, so you can see and start looking. Look at that packaging. Look at the phones when they come out. You're going to start seeing a lot more names. It's not just going to be Qualcomm. You're going to see Google Tensor. You're going to see the Apple A whatever, the M whatever. You're going to see the Qualcomm Snapdragon. You're going to see the Mediatek. And I'm here for it. You should be here for it, because I think it's going to give us a little bit more excitement, diversification, and some really cool options as we go into 2022. And this chipset is no slouch. We're talking over a 3 gigahertz primary core. We're talking like high 2 gigahertz normal, like mid-tier cores, and then the low cores are still like 1.85 gigahertz, I think. So this thing, serious power, serious battery. It's going to help your battery life a lot if you get it, because 4 nanometers, that is a tiny, tiny, tiny processor. Not a lot of room for the electricity and the energy to bounce around. It is going to be a good maximization and balance between power and battery. And we saw that this last year with the Dimensity 1200, because it was giving flagship level performance. The phones weren't getting super hot. The battery wasn't getting sucked out through a sieve like we have been with the Snapdragon 888, and it wasn't having the heat issues. So maybe Qualcomm can learn something from these guys. But I can't wait to get my first phone that will have one of these chips in it, because I'm really looking forward to testing it out. So that's all I got in this video. Hopefully you liked this. Hopefully it was engaging. Hopefully it's cool to learn about new stuff. It's not all about just, oh, look at the flashy phone. Sometimes it's cool to take a step back and look at some of the cool stuff, some of the really neat hardware. It's neat to kind of nerd out on some of this stuff every once in a while. So super cool, super excited, and that's all I got. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those down in the comment section. I'll get back with you. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and the subscribe button and a little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.